we're very exciting, and I hope it doesn't go so far that we start a fire, but if it does, I apologize. Wanted to welcome everybody here today. It's really nice on the first nice Saturday in a while for some people to come out and talk about this really important issue. It shows a commitment to the town, to the problem that we're facing with housing affordability, and a commitment to collectively trying to think about what some solutions will be. I want to say thanks to Pastor Morente for opening this up to us. It's really a nice opportunity. Good place, it's nice to be meeting here. Before we get into the program, I wanted to talk for a few minutes about why we're here, about why we care about affordable housing. A lot of times when we think about affordable housing, we think about the people who need it and about the strains that they face because they don't have it. So we worry about the fact that they spend too much of their income on housing, and that creates psychological stress, and that creates lower well-being because they have little discretionary money to enjoy life because so much of their income goes to housing. And maybe that concern is a sufficient reason to be here. But I also think it's really important to think about how affordable housing crises affect the whole community and the people who are well housed. When you spend more money than you have on housing, it creates problems for the people, but the way it affects the community is because it affects the composition of who can be here. Longtime residents can get priced out because they can no longer afford to live here. We talked to one business person in town who said that they have a pretty sweetheart lease right now, and if they lost that lease, they couldn't live in the community any longer. We've talked to seniors who say that they live in a house that is hard for them to maintain, that's too much space for them to live in, but there's no place for them to go to stay in the town. We know that young people who maybe even grew up here would like to come back and live here, but they can't afford it. We've also talked to people who would like to start families here, and the cost of buying a house, if you could start a family, is prohibitive for them. And one of the cultural backbones of this town has been the artist community. And artists often don't have the resources it takes now to live here. And so that causes problems. And one problem that it creates is economic. If you have more people spending money on housing, they're spending less in the local businesses. And if you have few people living here, residing in the community, they're spending, people who are spending money here are visitors, they're tourists, and they will be spending cyclically. They spend money on weekends, and then the town gets hollowed out on weekdays. They spend money in certain months, but not in others. We talked with other business people who said that they had to take a loan out every year because they made all the money they needed for the year, but they did it in a handful of months. And to get through those off months, they had to have help. And so this also is going to affect the kind of businesses that can thrive in the town. The businesses that cater to the tourists are going to be the ones that do better, and businesses that would cater to people who. Sorry, I read my notes to get through this. As well, people who want to have businesses that cater to the local populations have less people going because there's fewer people who are living and spending money on the regularly during the week. And so these economic effects then have social effects. The high costs affect who can stay. As I mentioned, artists, young singles, young families have a harder time here. The fact that we're affecting the population of who's here has the economic effects that lead to the cyclical tourist-based economy and the character of businesses that are here. And this in turn is going to affect who wants to live here because the character of the town is changing by these things. So some people describe this as being as something that could be a hollowing out of the community, where there's a community that exists, people live in the houses, there's businesses, and there's people there on weekends. But the people who are here are not the people who have the kind of commitment to the community, to their neighbors kids, and things like that, that make a community thrive. And so the costs of housing have this effect that is much greater than the effect on the people who actually can't find the house. So we've heard people say, Woodstock today isn't the Woodstock that I grew up in, that it's changing. And I think one of the real things that motivates the people on the committee are, can we come up with ways of addressing this problem and making it a community that can welcome a wide range of people. So we're going to work on, I guess the meeting today has 3 parts. Well, the first part is to try to talk about the nature of the problem. Housing is a complex problem. There's no solutions that exist that are not non-market solutions. There has to be non-market solutions. There's no magic bullet. And as a committee, we've been talking to a lot of people and having events of various kinds, and we've learned a lot. And my co-chair, Kathleen Teagan, is going to lead a presentation on the problem of affordable housing, what we know about it, and how we can think about addressing it. The second thing we're going to do is discuss the specific projects that the Housing Committee has been working on. In particular, this is exploring with the help of architectural and engineering firms the use of town land to build affordable housing. And then the second half of the meeting will be the third part, and that's where the main role is going to be to listen to all of you and to come up with to listen to your suggestions about how we can make progress on this difficult problem. So, Rebecca, if you could, this is the agenda formally. The first thing I would like to do is introduce us. I guess I never introduced myself, so I'll start there. My name is John Huber. I'm the co-chair of the Housing Committee. Catherine, you want to stand up? Let's have each person who's been able to make it stand up and introduce themselves. Catherine Teagan, the co-chair. Sabina Barrett, who's the committee. Rebecca Brooks. George Cross, unfortunately, is sick and couldn't make it. Deborah DeWan. Everyone knows Deborah, so she can just raise her hand. Gregory is in the back, and Anna, I think, is not here today. There's been a huge amount of work that's gone into the committee itself to make this event happen. So thank you to the committee members. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Kathy, who's going to lead us into the conversation on a lot of different things we learned.
Hi everyone, I'm going to share with you what we've been up to for the past 2 years. Been a lot of work, so we've been trying to answer these important questions. How do we build affordable housing that will fit the character of our town? Is it possible to build small and create housing that is attractive and sustainable, as well as financially feasible? So over the past 2 years, we've gotten lots of help from these organizations. HRA Advisors is the consultant that specializes in addressing housing challenges. And this was funded by a grant that we received from the Ulster County Housing Smart Initiative. Then we've been working with Fisher Associates since last year. This is an engineering and architectural firm that's based in Rochester. Fisher was hired by the town to evaluate townhome parcels for suitability for housing. And this is being funded by the federal government's American Rescue Plan Act. Then lastly, maybe most importantly, we've been working very closely with senior planner Kyler Farmer at the Ulster County Planning Department. He's been a fantastic help for us. And we've learned a lot. So I'm going to try to summarize as quickly as possible the key findings that I've gotten over the past 2 years. The first thing I wanted to share with you is the New York State Smart Growth Program. This is funded through the Environmental Protection Fund. And there are 10 use planning principles for the Smart Growth Program, and these are our guiding principles. And I will pull out the ones that relate most to housing, which are enable a diverse mix of housing types, prioritize infill and redevelopment of existing buildings to revitalize neighborhoods, encourage compact neighborhood design and concentrated development around existing infrastructure, preserve open space, agricultural resources, and natural resources, promote climate resiliency and adaptation, and build on unique traits to create an attractive and welcoming community with a strong sense of place. Lastly, engaged in an inclusive, collaborative, public planning process, which is what we are trying to do today. So following the lead of the New York State Smart Growth Program, we should prioritize infill development, which is housing built on undeveloped or underdeveloped lots within existing neighborhoods. And this is one of the main areas of focus for today's discussion. And secondly, adaptive reuse, which repurposes old buildings for modern needs. And we're not discussing buildings that could be repurposed today, but we should all keep it in mind for future planning. So this is a big tricky topic that I'm going to attempt to explain it. It's understanding affordability and eligibility. So for most income levels, housing is considered affordable when housing costs, either mortgage or rent, and utilities do not exceed 30% of the family's income. Income eligibility for affordable housing is based on area median income for AMI. AMI represents the median income of families living in a particular geographic area and varies with family size. And AMI is calculated every year by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, for each area across the U.S. So in 2026, the AMI for Woodstock is $119,000, $119,800 for a family of 4. And this graph shows concept of median, half the population is below the AMI and half above. It's different from average. It's actually the area, the number for the Kingston area, which Woodstock falls into. Developments which provide affordable housing usually set their income eligibility limit somewhere between 30% and 120% of pay. So, for example, if the income limit for a housing project is set at 50% of AMI, that means that a family of 4 or a household making equal to or less than $59,900 would be eligible for housing at this project in Woodstock. Eligibility and rents for a particular project are determined by 1, the objectives of the development sponsor, which would be Woodstock, funding and grant sources, and federal and local regulations. So for a specific project, the town of Woodstock would determine what the objectives of the project should be. For example, is it our mission to support seniors? Is it our mission to support families? What's the income level that we want to serve, which is where AMI comes in. And then the town works with the developer to decide objectives and income eligibility for each project. Okay, now on to housing types. It's my favorite topic. So in order to think about providing a diverse mix of housing types, I'm going to look at some of the options. Think about these because we're going to be talking about them later in the table discussions. What do you think might work for this one? First option is a low-rise apartment building. We're all very familiar with this. This is a photo of Woodstock Colony. It's up to 8 units per building, usually multiple buildings. Homes are 500 to 1,200 square feet each, and they have shared parking, common areas, and this example from Woodstock Commons is 52 apartments total. Then there's a cottage court or pocket neighborhood. You may not be familiar with this type, but it's really a charming type of housing. It's 4 to 12 small homes designed around a common area. It's very good at creating community. It's more affordable by design with small square footage, and it's usually detached parking. Then there's the multi-family home, which is 2, 3, or 4 apartments within a structure that looks like a house. Can be a combination of studios, 1 beds, or 2 beds. And we have a lot of these on Tinker Street already, so this is a very common type of Woodstock. And then the townhome, our attached homes range side by side, usually 2 stories high. There could be 4 to 8 units in each structure. And they can be apartments or they can be single family homes arranged vertically. Then I wanted to give you some real world examples of some of these affordable housing projects. This is Fairley Crossing, the old Saybrook, Connecticut, and this opened in 2012 and includes 16 deed restricted affordable rental homes within connected houses. So this was created for households earning at or below 80% AMI. It's a really beautiful. Then the cottages on Vaughn in Clarkson, Georgia. These are 7 cottages and 1 tiny home situated on the acre near downtown Clarkson. This is a pocket neighborhood that was developed by the Microlife Institute, and the community was designed with 3 common areas: landscaping to promote biodiversity, and nested homes that balance resident privacy with communal connectivity. The income limits for these homes is households earning at or below 80 to 120% AMI. And the price back in 2021 was only 109,000 to 200,000. This is a conceptual drawing of the cottage design line. This is 8 homes on just half an acre. Then we have the Ulster Habitat Hope Springs project in Saugerties. This has not been built yet, but it's going to be a new cul-de-sac development that will consist of 10 units of owner-occupied affordable housing. And visuals here show a street view of 10 homes. And on the next slide, you have floor plans with 3 bedrooms, living space, full kitchen, and washer dryer. And the income limits for these homes is households making 50 to 80% AMI. And the cost of homes has not been announced yet, but it will be subsidized in the long run. It's a nice conceptual drawing. We got this from the Habitat in this letter of what the homes will look like in the floodplain. So ways to build sustainably and keep costs down, because keeping the costs down to make these homes affordable is really important. As I'm sure everyone in this room knows, sustainable homes are high-performance structures that reduce environmental impact greatly. There's many years, there's a lot of money you can do, but I'll pull up the highlights, such as high-performance windows, heat pumps, energy-efficient appliances, low-flow vacuum fixtures, and environmentally friendly building materials. And sustainable homes may be more expensive to build, but the long-term savings from utility bills and maintenance make them more affordable in the long run. Then some sustainable construction methods are modular or panelized homes, which are built off-site in controlled plant conditions. They adhere to the same codes and standards as traditional construction, but they cut construction time in half. So for modular homes, builders are produced inset into modules. For a panelized home, factories produce large flat panels and then put them together on the end. Both modular and panelized methods are faster and greener due to limited waste and engineering methods that create energy efficient homes. And here's a drawing of how a panelized home gets put together on site. So these are perhaps the most critical ways that we can reduce costs and build affordable housing. Use existing infrastructure when possible. So that means take advantage of parcels that have access to town, water, and sewer, and limit excavation costs, i.e. use flat parcels when you can. And then also take advantage of existing road access, because if you have to build a road, that costs a lot of money. And then perhaps the best way to impact costs is to use free or donated land, which would be town-owned land that's being offered from faith-based congregations such as churches and synagogues, or people's backyards. And lastly, attempt to provide some financial insights. This is probably the most complicated part of building housing. And there's lots of ways that housing projects get funded. But the primary sources of the rental housing come from the government. So one's from the federal government, many other grants and programs that are available from New York State. And we're not discussing homeownership programs in detail today. But REPCO and Habitat for Humanity and New York State all offer homeownership programs, especially for first-time homeowners. Economic feasibility for rental housing is usually dependent upon the scale of the project. So building a small number of affordable homes is difficult. So this federal program, the Low Income Housing Tax Credit, called LIHTC for short. And when we were first meeting with HRNA, the consultant, they kept talking about LIHTC. And I was like, what the heck is LIHTC? But LIHTC is a federal program that provides a tax credit to support the development of affordable rental housing. So these are distributed to developers through state finance agencies. And LIHTC has historically benefited large housing projects of at least 40 units, which is why we see a lot of large housing projects. But now we're learning that LIHTC is now being applied to scattered site projects, so that bundling the sites together can help us qualify for tax credits. And then the New York State Home and Community Renewal Agency, or HCR, is the New York State Housing Finance Agency that provides funding for affordable housing, both rental and home ownership for families and seniors. New York State has a lot of different funds and grants we can take advantage of. The primary tools are the LIHTC tax credits, low interest loans, and grant programs to municipalities or nonprofits. Darren Scott, who's the director of upstate development at HCR, spoke at a webinar that we had in January about how we do this affordable housing stuff, especially the financing. And he had a lot of helpful things to say, told us a lot about the New York State programs we can take advantage of. And it was very clear that HCR wants to work in Woodstock, so that was very exciting to hear. So I encourage everyone to watch this webinar, super informative. We posted it on the town website. Some really good stuff there. Learn a lot. So to conclude, is it possible to build small and create affordable housing that is attractive and sustainable as well as financially? Well, we think the answer is yes. So I hope this information is giving you a framework to think about the town and parcels, which you're going to talk about in the next section. And I'm introducing Rebecca Brooks, housing committee member, who's going to lead us into that presentation. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to walk you through where we've come on this project so I can catch you up. All right, so the housing committee itself was formed in response to the housing needs that were identified in the comprehensive plan, which was adopted by the town board in 2018. That plan highlighted the need for more housing in order to keep our town economically viable and diverse. Now, as we know, the housing issues have only become more severe since 2018. During the pandemic, we noticed a lot of residents, a high influx of residents here who realized that Woodstock is a wonderful place to live. And so now we are looking at ways to build more housing that will be available at below market rates. And that's really the driving force behind what we're discussing today. So as Catherine mentioned, we realized there was a way that the town can be helpful in that whole financial equation, and that is to donate town-owned land to the process. So we started the town-owned parcels project by evaluating 34 properties that were owned by the town. After we identified the 5 most feasible parcels that are listed here on the slide, we issued an RFP, which is a request for proposals, and that was in October of 2024. That RFP asked engineering and architectural firms to evaluate the suitability of those 5 parcels for building affordable housing on them. We then hired a firm called Fisher Associates at the end of 2024, and the fees for their services are being covered by federal funding under the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, and we've been working with Fisher all through last year. So Fisher has structured the work in 3 stages. Each stage really explores a different level of viability. Stage 1 includes an initial overview of the 5 parcels. That includes site characteristics, zoning designations, environmental screenings, and water and sewer access information. Now, stage 1 report was delivered last year in February, and based on that report, the Housing Committee recommended and the Town Board agreed that the 5 properties be narrowed down to the 3 that we are going to talk about today. The stage 2 report was delivered in October of last year, and that digs deeper into the analysis of those 3 parcels, including summaries of site visits to survey environmental and geological conditions that may impact the construction of housing. Stage 3 will focus on some hypothetical plans for 1 or 2 of the parcels, once we narrow it down to 2. In that stage, Fisher is going to do some site development plans that will offer some design concepts, including illustrated plans and estimated costs. And those visuals are going to help us begin to understand what could possibly be built for housing on those sites. So as far as the stage 2 report, Fisher conducted site visits and analyzed things like plant communities, studying hazardous materials, wetlands, etc. That stage 2 report included details on engineering aspects such as site geology, tree clearing, drainage, utility access, and buildable areas. As part of the stage 2, there was a required phase 1 environmental site assessment, or ESA. Those were reports that were compiled by Fisher on all 3 of those parcels. Those reports are lengthy documents, about 100 to 200 pages each. They are available on the Housing Committee's site as well if you want to read those, along with the stage 2 report, which itself is much more consumable. So, in terms of the ESA, the major finding in that report was that there is no potential environmental risks or contaminants present on the 3 sites, specifically in the buildable areas. So now our task is to choose 2 parcels out of the remaining 3 to investigate more in stage 3, which will include architectural renderings and possible designs for affordable housing. And I want to emphasize that right now we are not currently making a decision to build housing on any particular parcel. We are continuing to study the potential for these sites and looking for the community as well as the town board to help us get to that final stage. Right now, we're going to summarize the stage 2 report for each of those 3 parcels. So I'm going to invite Gregory Stanford to come on up and start us off.
Hello. So I'm here to present the 3 Moreland class site. So let's go to the next slide. So this is the site that it has the end of Xena Road, south end of Xena Road, crossing over to 28. You know where Stewart's is down there, it's across the street. It's a site that most of us wouldn't have seen because it's kind of tucked around Bend just as you go up Xena Road. This is 31 acres, and it's a very rural site. It's actually quite a beautiful site. Let's go to the next slide and we'll bounce back to this. So this is the site, 31 acres. Let me explain where we are. So this is Xena Road here, 28's here. This is state land here. This is adjacent to the Bluestone Forest. And did I get that right? And then the Onteora Trail system is also to the southeast of here. The thing with this site is even though it's 31 acres, it's got a large wetland that cuts it all pretty much in the middle. So it's only about a third of the property that could actually be buildable. But that's actually a pretty good thing because this is really, except for some wetlands, it's not environmentally sensitive. Most of the environmental issues are down in this area that we wouldn't build on anyway. The outline here is showing you the inside of that outline is the potential buildable area. And our consultants say that within that area, we could build up to 50 units. Okay, so let's go back to the other slide. So it's already residentially zoned. Of course, it does not have town water or septic. So we need a whole septic system and a well. And so let's go 2 slides. Okay, so we said not environmentally sensitive in the area where we're planning to move and build. But the next one is basically the cons. It's got a number of serious cons. One of the things about it is it's basically just an entire rock. It's a rock ledge. So we had excavators there to really do evaluation of property, and it would be very difficult to build on because it would require a serious drilling. And the public transit's a little tricky, even though you could walk down to 20 feet and you do get the UCAT bus. That little stretch there, even though it's only about a 5-minute walk, is a dangerous little stretch. So, what else have we got going on here? Some tree clearing would have to happen up the front. But that could be mitigated with new planting later on. And erosion would be an issue, because imagine we do take out all those trees, we're on a rock ledge. All that water is gonna be rushing down into the wetlands, so. So it's prohibitive, very expensive to build up. Let's go to the next slide and see if I have anything else to talk about. So that's me. I didn't make a good case for the site, so it wasn't.
All right, so the next site is the Xena Highwood site. This is located at the corner of Xena Highwoods Road and Warren Court. The southern part of it actually abuts the Xena Rec property. This is a corner lot with 2 points of access, and it has 11.1 acres. And really, we're looking at only the top half northern part of that for development. It is zoned for residential use. Even though Fisher says the site can accommodate up to 40 units, just note that that is a max capacity based on square footage alone. It does not take anything else into account. And it is just for reference, and it is not what we would recommend for the site. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So looking a little bit more closely at the diagram, you can see the yellowish orange outline. That is the buildable area. It is the northernmost part of the property. And it is relatively flat and good for building on. In total, given the setbacks as well as open space requirements, we're probably looking at about 3.7 acres of buildable land. The rest of it, as I mentioned, on the southern part has significant slope issues and would require stormwater management once the rest is developed. There's several positives about this site. No recognized environmental concerns are in the outlying buildable areas. The area that is buildable is relatively flat and very amenable to building housing versus the other sloping southernmost parts. And as we mentioned, it has access to 2 streets, enabling some efficient flow for traffic in and out. Cons, so currently there is no water or septic there. There's no access to town water or septic. And the report did mention that this site has some very shallow bedrock, just about 1.5 feet below. So that might mean well drilling could be upwards of 500+ feet and would potentially increase the cost of infrastructure for building well and septic installations. It does have woods and would require some tree clearing. However, there is an opportunity for some more active forestry management here for the health of the remaining woods. The report did mention there were some pines that were in bad health, so it could be an advantage there. The report did also mention some threatened species, bats, monarch butterflies, so it would likely require some additional approvals from the DEC, Fish and Wildlife, and SEBRA. There is no public transportation to the site, which is a con, but not a deal breaker, and I will talk about that in a minute. And overall, all of these factors mean that this site is probably going to be moderately expensive to develop on. So the committee has considered all of this in light of other information as well, and we really think that this property has a lot of opportunity. First of all, it's a lovely parcel. For anyone who lives in the neighborhood, and I'm hoping that we have some Xena neighbors here, you know how beautiful this area is. We see this as an opportunity for someone to afford to live in a beautiful rural place and have access to the natural beauty and abundant wildlife. Now, as a smaller site surrounded by single-family homes, we think this is a place where it could make sense to explore some affordable home ownership models. Think maybe Habitat for Humanity. Now, before I mentioned that Fisher said it could fit 40 units, but we recognize that this is an area where low density buildings would be necessary to fit the character of the neighborhood. So this could be an opportunity to explore a low density project in this area and a higher density project closer to town. And that might make it a more appealing project for a developer who tends to need to find projects that happen at scale. We could also pursue some of the innovative housing types that Catherine mentioned, something like a fourplex multifamily home, which just looks like a very large home, or some of those cottage clusters too. So while it does not have access to public transportation, it is important to know that not everyone who lives in affordable housing is without a car. In fact, many people do have cars and get around that way. So because of that, we think that this would be a particularly attractive site for families. In fact, it's even a little bit closer to Kingston and therefore closer to some other essential services like medical, shopping, etc. Lastly, and one thing I did want to mention is that this particular parcel is not in the critical environmental area, though much of the surrounding area is. The DEC has a map, as you can see, I've reproduced it here. So the purple part surrounding it is the critical environmental area. The one circled in red is the parcel we're looking at. So it is not in that area, luckily. And I will pass it down to John to talk about the last lot.
So the last lot is the Mountain View parking lot. This is the lot right across from the colony where the public market had happened in summertime. And so this is where you enter from the colony. And there's a stream here, there's some wetlands over here. And you guys are familiar with the parking lot, which is, well, in my opinion, not a thing of beauty in our town. So this is zone residential. Right now, there's around 100 parking spots in it on 2.5 acres. This is the size of a possible model building that you could build. That's a 6-unit building that you could build on the lot. So one thing you could do is you could separate this lot into two with a road that goes through and connects this way. You could have housing on one side, not the other side. The idea that we're thinking about right now, we not need to take it out with parking, but to put part of it in parking and part of it in housing. This is the lot that has the greatest connection to the priorities that Catherine talked about when we're thinking about the way to develop housing in the town. It's relatively flat, we don't have to remove any trees. It has this walkability that none of the other lots would have. And there's transit that goes right there. And perhaps most importantly, it's the least expensive to build on because it's the only lot that's served by town water and sewage. So you wouldn't have to have septic if you built on this lot. The cons, I put farmers market in parentheses because we reached out to the farmers market and they said, we really want to have housing and we don't like this place anyway. And they met us at the meeting. They're working on this, and so this really isn't a con. They're not at all trying to hang on there. But this is the one that catches everyone's attention, so we want to talk in more detail about that. So we became the Counting Cars Committee over the summer, and as a committee, we figured out when the most high use time of the week was, which is on weekends, starting a little before the lunchtime and ending in late afternoon. And then we went and counted spots or cars, which wouldn't be the way, of course, because we know how big the parking lot is. And we collected data that said what kind of parking problem do we actually have in the town. So we focused on 3 lots, the Mountain View lot, the Rock City Road lot, which is the pay lot, and the lower Como lot. And so we didn't do the upper Como lot, which is another nice sized parking lot, but which is pretty far for people to walk with their foot. So in those 3 lots, we started in May and we ended up in September. And this dots shows how many empty parking spots were there at the busiest time of days during the busiest time of year. And you can see, does anyone know what happened on June 8th? It's the Pride Parade, right? That was the only day where we really maxed out our parking over the summer. We almost always had at least 50 spots that were available and empty at the busiest time of day. And a lot of times it was, much more than 50 spots available. Does this mean there's not a parking problem in town? We think that there is, but we're not the parking committee, but I'll talk like I'm on the parking committee just for a minute. We've been asking people, why does it seem like there's a parking problem if this data suggests that there are a lot of spaces available. But we have a fact, parking structures are rare. But people don't seem to know where the parking is, and so they circle around and they look for it. We talked to Complete Streets and they said, yeah, we know this is a problem. We talked to some business owners and said, yeah, we know there's plenty of spots, it's just that people can't find them. And so I think Complete Streets is trying to get the signage improved, but that will help, the traffic problem and get people into the spots more efficient. People also worry about traffic flow, that it's not just that they can't find spots, but it's really that the entrances from Rock City Road and Pomo all go through, the center of town, and the cars back way up right there, and that's really frustrating to people. Some people, businesses we talked to complain about the location of the handicap parking. Why do we have handicap parking in Lower Pomo? I mean, that's not Lower Pomo City, but Mountain View parking lot. That's a long way to go to get to the businesses in town. If you're handicapped, why not have more handicap street parking? Was what it just heard. Another person said, well, it's too bad that all our parking is right in the middle because we have businesses on the ends of town. And those aren't served by parking lots, and it's not just sort of how many spots, but where they are that matters. And people also emphasize concerns about workers. A lot of workers commute from out of town, and they afford to leave and stop. But when they leave a restaurant or a bar late at night from their job, the spaces that they go to often aren't very close, but you do something. So people identified a lot of problems in Woodstock related to traffic and problems, but they weren't about the number of spots. All right, they were really about the location of spots, how they serve the different businesses, how they serve handicapped people and things like that. So this is in many ways an ideal location for housing. There's nothing better if you look at that smart communities set of priorities that Catherine talked about. If you could put parking there, this would actually have an indirect effect on parking because people who work in the town could live in the town and walk to work. And so they're not having to drive from Kingston and take up a spot. And we think that this project could be undertaken by to emphasize something Rebecca said. We're talking about studying it some more, not doing it at this stage, but learning about how you could utilize that lot. We could have this done in conjunction with a comprehensive study by the town of the traffic and the parking issues, and maybe really have a positive impact on everything while thinking about how using part of that lot for positive. So what are the next steps? We're going to receive input from all of you today. We're going to make a recommendation to the town board about which two parcels to study further, not which two to build on. And then Fisher is going to take the input that we give them and develop schematics and more concrete plans of the two lots that are chosen by the town board. And that's what's happened in stage 3. Then it'll be back to the community for more discussion and more consideration by the town board. So what's going to happen next is you all can stand up and walk around for 5 or 10 minutes, get some coffee, get a cookie, talk to each other. But then we want to collect as many people around at the single table, so maybe you'll have to sit yourself around a little bit when we come back. We're going to have the table conversations, and Catherine will tell us how we do that as we get started. So let's take a 5 or 10 minute break. As you recall, you can use the restroom, it's through the door to that.